The best way for us to keep COVID-19 out of our schools is to keep COVID-19 out of our communities, or at least to keep the spread of COVID-19 as low as possible in our communities, and that we are doing today. This includes being in particularly and especially careful if you travel outside of the province. Right now, our neighbors to the east and west, they're seeing some rising case numbers. And I expect them to get that under control soon. But for now, if you do have to travel to another, if you don't have to travel to another province, please don't. If you absolutely do have to travel outside of Saskatchewan, we would urge you to try to limit the number of personal contacts that you would meet. Follow, of course, all of the good practices that we have repeatedly mentioned around physical distancing, your hand washing, and potential mask usage, and appropriate mask usage. Follow all the local public health orders wherever you are, and when you return to Saskatchewan, you should self-monitor for symptoms and consider getting tested, as testing is now open to everyone. As we know, this virus does not move by itself. People move it from one place to another. So let's all try to avoid bringing it into Saskatchewan from various locations outside of our province. It's how we'll keep ourselves, how we'll keep our families and our communities, as well as our schools, safer.
So just a few points, I'll go in a bit more detail. So as we have seen over the last week or so, our numbers, daily numbers have been extremely low. Our effective reproductive number is now around 0.5 and is well under 1 throughout the province. So I think that's a big achievement for everyone in Saskatchewan, that we have seen occasional increase in cases in different parts of the province. But right now we are in a really good position for the restart of schools next week. And again, if we were to see a case or a cluster in a school, as has been reported in other jurisdictions and other parts of the world, we laid out the approach that we'll take. Public health is working on a daily basis with schools and school divisions, and we're fully prepared to work with schools to manage the occasional case or cluster if we were to see one. Schools have put in a layered approach. And the best method for reducing COVID in schools remains staying home and seeking testing, irrespective of whether you're a student, a household member with a student in school, a staff member or teacher, or a household with a staff member or teacher working in a school. I think that has remained our mainstay of making sure that we isolate both as cases and contacts and prevent further transmission. Teachers are a priority group for testing, and all staff and students are encouraged to self-monitor, and parents to monitor their children and stay home and seek testing throughout the coming weeks. This is not just before school start, but throughout the next few weeks and months. Self-monitor and seek testing. That is going to be really important, and of course that will increase the number of times a child has to stay home. But that is something that all of us have had to become used to as we've re-entered the workforce, and we'll have to accommodate that for students and staff in schools as well. And then finally, I just want to say that it's what we've heard from both schools and parents is that many parents are looking forward to for children going back to school. Many children are looking forward. We all realize the positive impact schools have for not just education but physical, mental, and social development. And I think while schools have done a great job to make it safe, I think they are also making sure that even though things are a bit different, but it's a welcoming place for students going back to school. And I wish everyone a great back to school week next week. Thank you.
So why hasn't the government of Saskatchewan signed up for the federal government's COVID-19 tracking app? We're seeing more people kind of wanting access to the app, wanting to use it. What is the holdup or the hesitation to kind of sign up for the federal COVID-19 tracking app here in Saskatchewan?
So it's more of an alert app, a COVID alert app, as opposed to a tracking app. The app actually does not track anyone. It does send out an alert if you have been in contact with someone else's phone who the owner has been identified as having COVID. So this app, the work on this app actually began in Ontario under Premier Ford's government. The federal government, through our Council of Federation calls, has adopted a lot of that work and brought this COVID alert app, brought the potential to have it available across Canada. So all of the provinces, aside from Ontario, that was working on this earlier, all of the provinces now are working with the federal government on whether or not, A, they're going to make it available in their provincial or territorial jurisdiction, and B, when exactly and under what parameters that would be. So there's a little bit of consultation that is going on within the Saskatchewan Health Authority, but I could say that Saskatchewan is going to be moving ahead with making this app available. We had consultations and briefings with the minister as recently as a couple of hours ago. So we will be moving forward with this. We hope to have it available for those that choose here in Saskatchewan over the course of the next couple of weeks. And it will again be one additional tool that will be available for the people of this province to ensure that we are flattening the curve and continuing to reduce the spread of COVID-19.
In stage 4.2 of the reopen plan for some time now, and with cases as low as they are, is any consideration being given to entering stage 5 and maybe rethinking some of the remaining long-term restrictions?
So you might want to add to this as well, Doctor, but I would say as a blanket entry into stage 5, and not a lot of consideration being given to that, which is essentially mass gatherings. And in saying that, there are some, not mass gatherings, but some events where organizations have reached out, have been working with our public health office, Dr. Shahab and his team, on is there a way for this to ultimately be above our 30-person limits, but is there a way in these types of venues to safely have some type of event. I'm thinking of some of the discussions around some of our gate-driven leagues. The SJHL, some of our the WHL even. There was much discussion around how would a CFL operate if it was to operate. So there has been some of those discussions specific to different venues, different events. But as far as moving into essentially a mass level 5, let's have large events again. There's no discussion about that at this point in time. If you have anything to add to that, Doctor.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to say is, and I'm just looking at our phase 5 things, that I think one thing that we need to remember is that as long as, up till such time that there's an effective vaccine, for example, what we absolutely must do is maintain the precautions for the most vulnerable, so persons in long-term care facilities, personal care homes. I think that's essential. But, having said that, we have seen that, visitation policies have been relaxed, outdoor visitations are allowed where possible. But it has been done under a situation where there's low community transmission, and we've also seen that when community transmission increases, sometimes those more relaxed visitation policies get tightened up a bit. So I think that is something that we must absolutely continue with, protecting the most vulnerable. I think we all, want to see how, given that we have low transmission rates, I think the next, few weeks are really important to support a safe reopening of schools, because that is a large sector in terms of number of people going back to school and in terms of students and staff. So I think that's a key priority over the next few weeks. But having said that, we obviously need to look at, so we have static seating for 150 people at events, variety of events. We've done really well in Saskatchewan that we haven't had large outbreaks when people go to places of worship and other settings. And what I've heard is that, we do see occasional cases or clusters, but people have been very diligent with all the good practices, not going if you're unwell, maintaining that physical distance between households, quick contact tracing, because places of worship have lists of people who have gone. And all of that has helped us to prevent large outbreaks in those settings, which we've heard from other jurisdictions. And then certainly additional layers, such as a tracking app, can further help, because if you have larger gatherings, if you can cohort them into groups of 30 or 150 and where you don't mingle between groups, I think those principles are going to be key going forwards if there's opportunities to further look at opportunities in phase 5. But again, I would agree that I think we need to consolidate where we are, support school reopening. I think as the weather changes, we move indoors, relook at our practices, including more consistent mask use in indoor public spaces. And once we can reevaluate where we are in a few weeks, I think certainly We should look at other opportunities, but in a way that promotes, an approach that prevents uncontrolled transmission.